March 18, 2024, started as the most exciting day in the Henderson family's life. After 15 years of living in the small town of Cedar Falls, Iowa, they were finally making their dream move to San Diego, California. Mark Henderson, 42, had landed a prestigious position as head of cybersecurity for a major tech company, while his wife, Lisa, 39, was thrilled about the opportunity to restart her photography career in a city known for its stunning landscapes and vibrant art scene. Their children, Emma, 16, and Jake, 12, had mixed feelings about leaving their friends behind, but the promise of year-round sunshine and beaches had won them over. The family had spent months planning every detail of their relocation, from selling their house to researching schools and neighborhoods in their new city. Michael Henderson, Mark's younger brother, had driven them to Des Moines International Airport that morning. As a detective with the Cedar Falls Police Department, Michael had always been protective of his older brother's family, and he couldn't shake a strange feeling of unease as he watched them prepare for their departure. "You sure you have everything?" Michael asked for the third time as they stood outside the terminal. The March wind was bitter cold and everyone was eager to get inside, but something made him want to delay their departure just a little longer. Mark laughed and clapped his brother on the shoulder. "Mike, we've been planning this move for 6 months. We've got everything under control." He gestured toward their pile of luggage, 4 large suitcases, 2 carry-on bags, and Emma's oversized backpack that she refused to check. Lisa was busy doing a final head count of their belongings while simultaneously trying to keep Jake from wandering off. The 12-year-old was fascinated by the planes taking off and landing, and his attention span for family logistics was practically non-existent. "Emma, do you have your phone charger?" Lisa called out to her daughter, who was saying goodbye to her best friend via FaceTime. "Yes, Mom, for the 100th time," Emma replied with the exasperated tone that only teenagers could perfect. Despite her attitude, Michael could see she was excited about the move. She had already researched photography programs at several California universities and was planning to spend her senior year building a portfolio. The family dynamic was something Michael had always admired. Mark and Lisa had been high school sweethearts who had managed to maintain their connection through college, early career struggles, and the challenges of raising 2 children. They were the kind of couple that still held hands in public and genuinely enjoyed each other's company, even after nearly 20 years of marriage. Mark worked as an IT specialist for a local insurance company, a job that had provided stability, but little excitement. The offer from the San Diego tech firm had come out of nowhere. A headhunter had contacted him through LinkedIn, and within 3 weeks he had gone through multiple interviews and received an offer that was too good to refuse. "The timing is perfect," Mark had told Michael when he first shared the news. "Emma's got 1 more year of high school. Jake's at a good age to adapt to a new place, and Lisa's been talking about wanting a fresh start with her photography for years." Michael had been happy for them, but as a cop, he had learned to trust his instincts, and something about the sudden job offer had felt too convenient. When he had casually suggested that Mark have the company thoroughly vetted, his brother had laughed it off. "Mike, you're being paranoid. It's a legitimate company with a great reputation. Sometimes good things just happen." Now standing outside the airport terminal, Michael wished he had pushed harder. The feeling of unease that had been nagging at him for weeks was stronger than ever, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was bothering him. "Flight 447 to San Diego doesn't board for another 2 hours, Lisa said, checking her phone for the 100th time. "We should probably head inside and get through security." The family gathered their belongings and began moving toward the terminal entrance. Michael walked alongside them, carrying Jake's backpack and trying to memorize every detail of this moment. The way Emma was texting rapidly on her phone, how Jake was practically bouncing with excitement, the calm confidence on Mark's face, and the slight nervousness in Lisa's eyes that she was trying to hide. "You know," Michael said as they approached the automatic doors, "maybe I should come visit in a few months. I've never been to California." "You better," Mark replied. "We're going to have a guest room with your name on it, and Lisa's already planning to drag you to every tourist attraction in the city." Lisa laughed. "Someone has to make sure you actually see something besides the inside of police stations and crime scenes." They entered the terminal, and Michael was immediately struck by how busy it was for a Monday morning. Des Moines International wasn't a huge airport, but it was bustling with travelers. and the Henderson family quickly became just another group among hundreds of people moving through the concourse. "Okay," Mark said, pulling out his phone to check their boarding passes one more time. "Gate B7, security checkpoint is right over there." Michael looked around the terminal, his detective training automatically cataloging exits, security cameras, and potential threats. Everything looked normal. Families with children, business travelers with laptops, elderly couples moving slowly through the crowds. "I guess this is goodbye for now," Lisa said, giving Michael a warm hug. "Thank you for everything you've done to help us with this move. We couldn't have managed without you." Emma and Jake each gave their uncle quick hugs, eager to get through security and explore the terminal. Mark was the last to say goodbye, and as the brothers embraced, Michael felt that nagging sense of unease intensify. "Take care of yourself out there," Michael said. "And call me when you land, okay?" "Of course," Mark replied. "We'll probably call you so much you'll get sick of hearing from us." Michael watched as his brother's family joined the security line, their luggage in tow and boarding passes in hand. Lisa turned back once to wave, and Jake pressed his face against the glass partition to make funny faces at his uncle. That was the last time Michael Henderson would see his brother's family alive. At 11:47 a.m., Mark, Lisa, Emma, and Jake Henderson passed through TSA Security Checkpoint B without incident. Airport cameras captured them collecting their belongings, putting their shoes back on, and walking toward their gate. At 12:15 p.m., AEE, gate agent announced that Flight 447 to San Diego was beginning boarding for first-class passengers and families with small children. At 12:45 p.m., the gate agent made a final boarding call for Flight 447. At 1 p.m., Flight 447 departed for San Diego with 127 passengers on board. The Henderson family was not among them, and by 1:30 p.m., when Michael's phone should have been ringing with news of their safe departure, he was already driving back to the airport with a growing sense of dread that would prove to be entirely justified. The Henderson family had vanished, without a trace in one of the most surveilled, security-conscious environments in the world, and the only clue they left behind would turn Michael's understanding of his brother's life completely upside down. Michael's phone rang at 1:47 p.m. as he sat in the airport parking lot, staring at the terminal building and trying to convince himself that everything was fine. The call was from his partner, Detective Sarah Chen. "Mike, you need to get back to the station. We've got a situation." "What kind of situation?" Michael asked, though part of him already knew. "Your brother's family never boarded their flight. Airport security wants to talk to you." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of interviews, security footage reviews, and growing panic. Michael found himself on both sides of a missing persons investigation for the first time in his career. He was family of the victims, but his police credentials gave him access to information that would normally be restricted. TSA confirmed that all 4 family members had passed through security at 11:47 a.m. Camera footage showed them walking toward Gate B7, but somewhere between the security checkpoint and their departure gate, they had simply vanished. "This doesn't make sense," Michael told Airport Security Chief Robert Martinez as they reviewed footage for the 3rd time. "People don't just disappear in airports. There are cameras everywhere." Martinez nodded grimly. "That's what makes this so unusual. We've got coverage of every major corridor, every gate, every exit, but after 11:52 a.m. we lose them completely." The last clear image showed the family walking past a Starbucks near Gate B5, just 2 gates away from their departure point. Mark was pulling one of the large suitcases. Lisa had her purse and carry-on. Emma was texting on her phone, and Jake was carrying his backpack and looking around with excitement. Then nothing. "What about the bathrooms?" Michael asked. "Storage areas? Maintenance corridors?" "We've checked everything," Martinez replied. "Maintenance staff, cleaning crews, airline personnel. Nobody saw them after noon." By 8 p.m., the FBI had been called in. Agent Rebecca Torres, a specialist in airport security and missing persons cases, took over the investigation. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an intensity that reminded Michael of a hunting dog picking up a scent. "Detective Henderson," she said as they met in the airport security office, I need you to understand that this case is now federal jurisdiction, but I want your cooperation. You know this family better than anyone. Michael nodded. Whatever you need. Tell me about your brother's job situation. This move to California, was it planned or sudden? Sudden, Michael admitted. Mark got contacted by a headhunter about 6 weeks ago. The whole process moved very fast. Agent Torres made a note. What's the name of the company? Nexus Technologies. It's a cybersecurity firm in San Diego. Torres exchanged a look with her partner, Agent David Kim. We'll need to verify that company's legitimacy. You think it might be fake? In cases like this, we don't assume anything is real until we can prove it. The breakthrough came at 2:30 a.m. on March 19th, nearly 15 hours after the family's disappearance. A janitor named Carlos Mendez was cleaning the men's restroom near Gate B7 when he found something wedged behind one of the toilets. It was a folded piece of paper with Michael Henderson, Cedar Falls PD, written on the outside in Mark's handwriting. Agent Torres called Michael immediately. We found something. You need to get back here. Michael had been at home, pacing his living room and calling every hospital in a 50-mile radius. He made the drive to the airport in 23 minutes, breaking several speed limits and running 2 red lights. The note was brief, written in Mark's careful block letters. Mike, if you're reading this, we're already gone. The past caught up with us. Don't trust anyone from the company. Look, for the Chicago connection, protect yourself. Michael read it 3 times before the words sank in. Chicago connection? What the hell does that mean? Agent Torres was studying the note with a magnifying glass. The paper is standard airport stationery, probably from the information desk. The pen ink is fresh, written within the last 24 hours. But why would Mark write this? Michael asked. If they were in danger, why didn't he call me? Why didn't they go to airport security? Maybe they couldn't, Agent Kim suggested. Maybe someone was watching them. Torres looked up from the note. Detective Henderson, I need you to think carefully. Has your brother ever mentioned Chicago? Any connections to that city? Michael shook his head. Mark's lived in Iowa his whole life. He went to college at Iowa State, met Lisa there, got married, had kids. He's never even visited Chicago as far as I know. What about before you knew him well? Childhood, early adulthood? We grew up together. I'm only 3 years younger than Mark. We shared a bedroom until I was 16. But even as Michael said it, something nagged at him. There had been a period when Mark was in college when he had been secretive about his activities. Michael had been in high school then, more focused on sports and girls than his older brother's life. There was something, Michael said slowly. When Mark was a junior in college, he had a summer internship. He was gone for 3 months, and when he came back, he was different. Different how? Quieter, more serious. He used to be the kind of guy who would tell you every detail of his day, but after that summer, he became more private. Torres made notes. Do you remember where the internship was? Michael closed his eyes, trying to remember conversations from over 20 years ago. He said it was with a tech company, something about database management. But now that I think about it, he never talked about the work itself, just that it was complicated and boring. We need to find out everything about that internship, Torres said. And we need to verify this Nexus Technologies company. Agent Orr. Kim had been working on his laptop throughout the conversation. He looked up with a grim expression. Agent Torres, we have a problem. What is it? Nexus Technologies doesn't exist. The website is real, the phone numbers work, but the company, registration is fake. It was created 6 weeks ago, right around the time Mark Henderson was first contacted. The room fell silent. Michael felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Someone created an entire fake company just to lure my brother's family to the airport? It looks that way, Torres said, which means this wasn't a random crime. Someone specifically targeted your family, and they've been planning this for weeks. Michael stared at the note again, his brother's words taking on a more ominous meaning. The past caught up with us. What past? What had Mark been involved in that could lead to his entire family disappearing? We need to go back 20 years, Michael said. Whatever happened during that summer internship, that's where this started. Torres nodded. We'll start with college records, internship programs, anything we can find from that time period. But Detective Henderson, I need you to be prepared for the possibility that your brother wasn't the person you thought he was. Michael looked at the note one more time, then folded it carefully and handed it back to Torres. Agent Torres, I've been a cop for 15 years. I've learned that everyone has secrets. But Mark is my brother. And whatever he did or didn't do 20 years ago, he doesn't deserve this, and his family sure as hell doesn't deserve this. We're going to find them, Torres said, but we need to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if we don't like what we discover. As Michael left the airport for the second time in 24 hours, he couldn't shake the feeling that his brother's note was both a clue and a warning. The past caught up with us. Don't trust anyone from the company. Protect yourself. What had Mark gotten involved in all those years ago? And who was still hunting him after 2 decades? By 6 a.m. on March 19th, Agent Torres had assembled a task force that included FBI cybercrime specialists, airport security experts, and analysts from the Chicago field office. The investigation had officially become a federal case with potential interstate implications. Michael sat in the FBI's temporary command center at the airport, watching agents work phones and computers with an efficiency that would have been impressive under different circumstances. Every few minutes, someone would approach Torres with new information, and Michael would strain to hear whether it was about his family. Detective Henderson, Torres called out around 8 a.m. We found something about that internship. Michael hurried over to where Torres was standing with Agent Kim and a woman he didn't recognize. This is Agent Patricia Walsh from our Chicago office, Torres said. She's been looking into college internship programs from 2003. Agent Walsh was in her 50s with gray hair and the kind of tired eyes that suggested she'd seen too much over the years. She shook Michael's hand with a firm grip. Your brother's internship was with a company called Dataflow Solutions, Walsh said. It was a legitimate business that specialized in database security for financial institutions. But here's where it gets interesting. Dataflow was investigated by the FBI in 2004 for potential money laundering activities. Michael felt his stomach drop. Money laundering? The company was allegedly helping certain clients hide financial transactions by manipulating database records. The investigation was closed without charges, but several employees were questioned, including summer interns. Torres pulled up a file on her laptop. According to the FBI records from that investigation, your brother was interviewed twice. The reports indicate he was cooperative but claimed to have no knowledge of any illegal activities. Was he telling the truth? Michael asked. Walsh shrugged. The investigating agents believed he was just a college kid who got caught up in something bigger than he understood. But there's something else. 3 other interns from that same program have died under suspicious circumstances over the past 15 years. The room seemed to spin around Michael. Died how? Car accident in 2008, apparent suicide in 2012, and a home invasion in 2018. All 3 deaths were investigated by local police and closed without finding any connection to their time at Dataflow. Agent Kim looked up from his computer. But now we have a 4th intern whose family has disappeared under mysterious circumstances. That's not a coincidence. Torres was already making phone calls. I want protection details on any other Dataflow interns who are still alive. And I want everything we can find about who was running that money laundering operation. Michael's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it absently, then froze. The message was from Mark's phone number. Stop looking or they disappear, forever. Torres. Michael called out, his voice tight. You need to see this. The agent hurried over and read the message. When did this come in? Just now, but Mark's phone was turned off yesterday. We've been trying to track it since they disappeared. Torres immediately called the FBI's technical team. I need a trace on this number, and I need it now. While they waited for the trace results, Walsh continued briefing them on the Dataflow investigation. The company was owned by a man named Vincent Caruso, who had alleged ties to organized crime families in Chicago. Caruso died in 2019, but his son Anthony took over the business interests. You think Anthony Caruso is behind this? Michael asked. It's possible. If the data flow interns saw something they shouldn't have, and if someone was worried they might eventually talk, Agent Kim interrupted. The phone trace came back. The text was sent from a cell tower in Kansas City, Missouri. Torres immediately began coordinating with the Kansas City FBI office. They're moving them, she said, which means they're still alive. But it also means we're running out of time. Michael stared at his phone, reading the message again. Stop looking or they disappear forever. The implication was clear. His family was being held somewhere and their captors were monitoring the investigation. What if we stop? Michael asked. What if we call off the investigation? Torres looked at him with sympathy. Detective, you know as well as I do that people who kidnap entire families don't usually let them go, regardless of what they promise. Our best chance of getting them back alive is to find them before their captors decide they're too much of a liability. Michael nodded, though every instinct in his body was screaming at him to do whatever it took to keep his family safe, even if it meant letting the kidnappers win. There's something else, Walsh said, consulting her notes. The data flow investigation was closed abruptly in 2004. The lead agent was transferred to a different case and all the evidence was sealed. Someone with significant influence wanted that investigation to go away. Who had that kind of influence? Torres asked. That's what we need to find out. But if someone was powerful enough to shut down an FBI investigation 20 years ago, they might be powerful enough to make a family disappear today. Michael's phone buzzed again. Another text from Mark's number. You have 48 hours. This time there was an attachment, a photo of Emma and Jake sitting in what looked like the back seat of a van. They appeared unharmed but frightened. Emma was holding a newspaper with yesterday's date clearly visible. They're alive, Michael whispered, relief flooding through him despite the circumstances. Torres was already on the phone with the Kansas City office. We need every available agent on this, and I want to know everything about Anthony Caruso's current activities. As the investigation shifted into high gear, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led into a trap. The kidnappers were communicating with them, providing proof of life, even giving them a deadline. It felt too organized, too controlled. Torres, he said, what if this isn't just about silencing witnesses? What if someone wants us to find them? The agent paused in her phone conversation. What do you mean? Think about it. They could have killed Mark's family and made them disappear forever. Instead, they're communicating with us, giving us clues, setting up a timeline. It's like they want us to follow them. Torres considered this. You think we're walking into an ambush? I think we're walking into something, Michael said. I just don't know what yet. The FBI's Kansas City field office was a fortress of glass and steel that Michael had never expected to see from the inside. By 2 p.m. on March 19th, he found himself in a conference room with Agent Torres, Agent Walsh, and 3 Kansas City agents who looked like they'd been pulled from other cases to deal with what was rapidly becoming a multi-state investigation. Special Agent in Charge Rebecca Martinez, no relation to the airport security chief, was a woman in her 40s with the kind of commanding presence that made everyone in the room sit up straighter when she spoke. We've identified the cell tower that transmitted those messages, she began, pointing to a map of Kansas City on the wall. It's in an industrial area on the east side of the city near the Missouri River. The area is mostly warehouses and abandoned buildings. Agent Torres leaned forward. Any connection to Anthony Caruso or his business interests? That's where it gets interesting, Martinez replied. Caruso doesn't own any property in that area directly, but one of his shell companies purchased a warehouse complex there 6 months ago. The purchase was made through 3 different intermediary companies, clearly designed to hide the connection. Michael studied the map. 6 months ago? That's before Mark was even contacted about the fake job. Which suggests this has been in planning for a long time, Walsh observed. Someone has been watching your brother's family and waiting for the right opportunity. Agent Kim, who had been working on his laptop throughout the briefing, looked up with a grim expression. I've been digging deeper into the other data flow interns who died. The timing is significant. He pulled up a timeline on his computer screen. The first death was in 2008, right after the statute of limitations expired on the original money laundering charges. The second was in 2012, when there was talk of reopening the data flow investigation. The third was in 2018, just before Vincent Caruso died and his son took over the business. Torres was taking notes rapidly. So someone has been systematically eliminating anyone who might have knowledge of what happened at Dataflow. But why wait until now to go after Mark? Michael asked. What changed? Martinez answered. 3 weeks ago, the Justice Department announced they were reopening several cold cases from the early 2000s, including financial crimes that might have been prematurely closed due to political pressure. The Dataflow case was specifically mentioned in internal memos. The pieces were starting to come together, but Michael didn't like the picture they were forming. So Mark wasn't just a random target. Someone knew the investigation might be reopened, and they decided to eliminate all potential witnesses before that could happen. That's our working theory, Torres confirmed. But there's something else. We've been monitoring Anthony Caruso's communications since yesterday, and he's been making a lot of phone calls to someone in Washington, D.C. Walsh pulled up another file. The calls are going to a number registered to a consulting firm called Capital Strategic Solutions. The firm specializes in crisis management for high-profile clients. Political fixers, Michael said. People who make problems go away. Exactly. And if Caruso is calling in political favors to handle this situation, it means he's desperate, which could be good news for your family. Desperate people make mistakes. Michael's phone buzzed again. Another message from Mark's number. Warehouse District, East Kansas City. Come alone. You have until midnight. This time, there was no photo, just an address. Martinez immediately began coordinating with her tactical teams. We'll have the area surrounded within the hour. Snipers, surveillance, the works. Wait, Michael said. They said come alone. If they see a federal response team, they might kill my family. Torres put a hand on his shoulder. Detective, you're not going in there alone, that's not negotiable. But what if they kill you too? Torres interrupted. Then we lose our best chance of understanding what really happened 20 years ago, and your family is still in danger. Agent Kim had been studying satellite images of the warehouse district. There's something odd about this location. The warehouse they're directing us to has been empty for 2 years, but the power and water are still connected. Someone's been maintaining it. Martinez nodded. It's a perfect location for a hostage situation. Isolated, multiple exit routes, and far enough from residential areas that gunfire wouldn't immediately attract attention. Michael stared at the address on his phone. This feels like a setup. They want us to come to them, on their terms, in a location they've prepared. Of course it's a setup, Torres agreed. The question is whether we can turn it to our advantage. Walsh had been quiet during most of the discussion, but now she spoke up. There's something else we need to consider. If Anthony Caruso is behind this, he's not just trying to eliminate witnesses, he's trying to send a message. What kind of message? Michael asked. That no one is safe, no matter how much time has passed. That he can reach anyone, anywhere, anytime. It's a classic intimidation tactic used by organized crime families. Martinez was already on the phone with her tactical commander. I want eyes on that warehouse within 30 minutes. Full surveillance, but maintain distance. And I want to know about every person who's entered or left that area in the past 48 hours. Michael felt helpless as the federal agents took control of the situation. This was his family, his brother, his niece and nephew. But he was being sidelined while others made decisions about their fate. Agent Torres, he said, I need to be part of whatever happens next. I'm not just going to sit here while you decide how to handle this. Torres looked at him for a long moment. Detective Henderson, I understand how you feel, but you're too close to this case. Your judgment is compromised. My judgment is the only thing that might save them, Michael replied. I know Mark better than anyone. I know how he thinks, how he reacts under pressure. If he's still alive in there, he's probably trying to find a way to help his family escape. But he needs to know that help is coming. Martinez ended her phone call and rejoined the conversation. Our surveillance team is in position. The warehouse appears to be occupied. We're seeing heat signatures for at least 6 people inside, possibly more. 6 people? Michael asked. That's more than just my family, which means either there are multiple captors or there are other hostages we don't know about. Agent Kim pulled up building schematics on his laptop. The warehouse has 3 main entrances and 2 emergency exits. There's also a loading dock that could be used for vehicle access. Torres studied the layout. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. One mistake and people die. Michael's phone buzzed one more time. The message was brief. Time's running out. But this time the message wasn't from Mark's phone. It was from an unknown number, and it included a photo that made Michael's blood run cold. The photo showed Mark, tied to a chair, with a gun pointed at his head. His face was bruised, and there was blood on his shirt, but his eyes were alert and angry. Written on a piece of paper in front of him were the words, "Last chance." At 9:47 p.m., Michael found himself crouched behind a concrete barrier 3 blocks from the warehouse, wearing a bulletproof vest and carrying a radio that connected him to the FBI tactical team. The plan was simple in theory. Michael would approach the warehouse as requested, but he wouldn't be alone. Snipers were positioned on surrounding buildings, surveillance teams had eyes on all exits, and a tactical response unit was standing by. In practice, Michael knew that plans rarely survived contact with reality. "Radio check," came Agent Torres's voice through his earpiece. "Copy," Michael replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "Remember, your job is to get inside and assess the situation. Don't try to be a hero. We need intelligence before we can act." Michael nodded, though he knew Torres couldn't see him. "Understood." The warehouse district was eerily quiet. Streetlights cast long shadows between the buildings, and the only sounds were the distant hum of traffic and the occasional train whistle from the rail yards nearby. Michael had been in dangerous situations before during his police career, but this felt different. This was personal. As he approached the warehouse, Michael could see that it was larger than he'd expected, a sprawling complex that looked like it had been built in the 1970s and abandoned sometime in the last decade. Most of the windows were broken or boarded up, and weeds grew through cracks in the parking lot. But there were signs of recent activity, fresh tire tracks in the dirt, and a faint light visible through one of the ground floor windows. Michael's radio crackled. "Thermal imaging shows movement on the 2nd floor northwest corner. At least 4 heat signatures." "Copy that," Michael whispered. The main entrance was a heavy steel door that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. But as Michael approached, he noticed that the rust around the hinges was disturbed and there were fresh scratches on the lock. Before he could knock, the door swung open. The man standing in the doorway was not what Michael had expected. Instead of a hardened criminal, he saw someone who looked like an accountant, middle-aged, wearing glasses with thinning hair and a nervous expression. "Detective Henderson?" the man asked. "That's me. My name is David Chen. I think you should know that I'm not here voluntarily either." Michael's radio crackled with Torres's voice. "Unknown individual at the entrance. Proceed with caution." Chen stepped aside to let Michael enter. The interior of the warehouse was dimly lit by battery-powered lanterns, and Michael could see that someone had set up a makeshift camp in one corner, folding chairs, a card table, and several sleeping bags. "Where's my family?" Michael asked. "Upstairs," Chen replied. "They're unharmed, but—" He gestured helplessly. "This whole situation is out of control." "Who are you?" Michael asked, though he was already starting to suspect. "I was an intern at Data Flow Solutions in 2003. Same program as your brother." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. "You're supposed to be dead. The FBI said all the other interns had been killed." Chen shook his head. "3 of us are dead, but there were 6 interns in the program, not 4. The FBI missed 2 of us in their records. Where's the 6th intern? Chen pointed toward a staircase leading to the 2nd floor. Upstairs with your family. His name is Anthony Caruso, Jr. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Caruso's son was an intern at his father's company. Vincent Caruso wanted his son to learn the business from the ground up, Chen explained. But Anthony Jr. was never supposed to be involved in the illegal activities. When the FBI investigation started, Vincent made sure his son's name was kept out of the records. Michael's radio crackled again. Movement on the 2nd floor, multiple heat signatures converging. We need to go upstairs, Chen said. Anthony is waiting. As they climbed the metal staircase, Michael tried to process what he was learning. If Anthony Caruso Jr. was an intern, why is he kidnapping the other interns now? Because he's not the one in charge, Chen replied. His father's old associates are. They're using Anthony to clean up loose ends before the Justice Department reopens the case. They reached the 2nd floor, which had been converted into a makeshift office space. Michael could see his family sitting in chairs near the far wall. Mark, Lisa, Emma, and Jake all tied up but apparently unharmed. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by anger. Standing near them was a young man in his 30s who looked like a younger version of the Vincent Caruso photos Michael had seen in FBI files. Anthony Caruso Jr. was pacing nervously, and Michael could see a gun tucked into his waistband. Detective Henderson, Anthony said as Michael and Chen entered the room. Thank you for coming. Let my family go, Michael said. Whatever this is about, they're not involved. Anthony laughed bitterly. That's what I thought too. But apparently, just being present during that summer internship makes us all potential witnesses to federal crimes. Mark looked up as Michael entered. Despite being tied up and obviously beaten, his eyes were alert. Mike, this isn't what it looks like. What does it look like? Michael asked. It looks like Anthony here kidnapped my family to force me to keep quiet about something I saw 20 years ago, Mark replied. But the truth is, Anthony's as much a prisoner as we are. Anthony nodded. My father's old business partners decided that the safest way to handle the Justice Department investigation was to eliminate all potential witnesses. They're using me to do their dirty work because they know I can't go to the police without implicating myself. Michael's radio crackled with Torres's voice. Multiple vehicles approaching the warehouse. Unknown number of occupants. Anthony heard the radio transmission and his face went pale. They're here. Who's here? Michael asked. The people who are really in charge of this operation, Anthony replied. And they're not planning to leave any witnesses alive, including me. Through the warehouse windows, Michael could see headlights. Approaching. The situation had just become much more complicated. Torres, Michael said into his radio, we have a problem. The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the warehouse as Michael quickly assessed the situation. His family was tied up but alive. Anthony Caruso Jr. was clearly terrified, and David Chen looked like he was about to have a panic attack. How many people are coming? Michael asked Anthony. I don't know, Anthony replied, his voice shaking. They told me to bring the witnesses here, but they didn't tell me what would happen next. Michael's radio crackled. At least 6 vehicles, estimated 12 to 15 individuals. They're surrounding the building. Torres, my family is on the 2nd floor with 2 other hostages. The situation is not what we expected. Copy that. Stand by. Mark was struggling against his restraints. Mike, you need to get Emma and Jake out of here. Whatever this is about, they don't deserve to be caught in the middle. Before Michael could respond, they heard footsteps on the metal staircase. Heavy boots, multiple people, moving with military precision. Anthony pulled the gun from his waistband, but his hands were shaking so badly that Michael doubted he could hit anything, even if he tried. Put the gun down, Michael said quietly. You're not a killer. You don't understand, Anthony replied. If I don't do what they want, they'll kill my mother and sister too. They've been holding them since yesterday. The first man to reach the 2nd floor was someone Michael recognized from FBI photos. Vincent Caruso's former lieutenant, a man named Frank Torino who had supposedly retired from organized crime years ago. He was followed by 3 other men, all carrying automatic weapons. "Anthony," Torino said in a voice that sounded like gravel. "You did good getting them here. Now step aside." "Frank, you said you just wanted to talk to them," Anthony protested. Torino smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I lied." Michael's radio crackled again, but this time it was a different voice. "Federal agents, the building is surrounded. Release the hostages and come out with your hands up." Torino cursed and motioned to his men. "Positions. We're not leaving any witnesses." Michael realized that the FBI's presence had just escalated the situation beyond anyone's control. Torino and his men were now trapped, which made them infinitely more dangerous. "Frank," Michael said, trying to keep his voice calm, "you're surrounded by federal agents. The smart play here is to negotiate." Torino turned to look at Michael for the first time. "You must be the cop, brother. You know what? You're right. Let's negotiate." He walked over to where Emma was tied up and pressed his gun against her head. "Here's my negotiation. Everyone backs off or the kid dies first." Emma whimpered and Michael felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "What do you want?" "I want what I've always wanted," Torino replied. "For the past to stay buried. Your brother and his friends here saw things they shouldn't have seen 20 years ago. Now the Justice Department wants to dig it all up again." David Chen spoke, up for the first time since they'd reached the 2nd floor. "Frank, we were just college kids. We didn't understand what we were seeing." "But you remember it, don't you?" Torino asked. "You remember the names, the account numbers, the transactions? You remember enough to destroy everything Vincent Caruso built?" Mark was staring at Torino with recognition dawning in his eyes. "You were there that summer. You were one of the men who came to the office late at night." "Very good," Torino said. "I was Vincent's right hand for 30 years. I helped build that operation, and I'm not going to let some college kids tear it down now." Michael's radio crackled. "Shots fired at the south entrance. Repeat, shots fired." Torino's men immediately took defensive positions around the room. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. "Frank," Anthony said desperately, "this wasn't the plan. You said we were just going to scare them." "Plans change, kid," Torino replied. "Your father understood that sometimes you have to make hard choices to protect the family business." "My father is dead," Anthony shot back, "and I'm not him." "No," Torino agreed. "You're not. You're weak, just like your old man said you were." Michael saw Anthony's face change at those words. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with anger. "My father never said I was weak," Anthony said quietly. "He said it all the time," Torino replied with cruel satisfaction. "Said you didn't have the stomach for the real business. Said you were too soft to carry on the family name." Michael realized that Torino was making a mistake. He was so focused on intimidating everyone that he wasn't paying attention to how his words were affecting Anthony. "That's not true," Anthony said, his voice getting stronger. "It is true," Torino continued. "Why do you think he kept you out of the real operations? Why do you think he sent you to that internship program with a bunch of college kids instead of bringing you into the family business?" Anthony's grip on his gun was steadying. "Because he wanted to protect me." "Because he was ashamed of you," Torino said. "That was the breaking point." Anthony raised his gun and pointed it at Torino. "You're lying." "Anthony, don't," Michael said quickly. "This isn't the way." But Anthony wasn't listening anymore. 20 years of doubt and resentment were pouring out of him. "My father loved me. He was trying to give me a different life." Torino laughed. "Your father was a criminal, kid, and so are you. The only difference is that you're not very good at it." The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space, but it wasn't Anthony who fired. It was David Chen, who had somehow gotten hold of one of the weapons dropped by Torino's men during the confusion. Torino fell to the ground, clutching his shoulder and cursing. "I'm tired of being afraid," Chen said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I've been running from this for 20 years and I'm done." Michael's radio exploded with chatter. "Shots fired on the 2nd floor. Repeat, shots fired on the 2nd floor." Torres, Michael said into his radio. We need medical assistance up here. One suspect down, hostages secure. But even as he said it, Michael knew the situation was far from over. Torino's men were still armed and dangerous. The FBI was preparing to storm the building, and somewhere in the chaos, the truth about what had happened 20 years ago was finally starting to emerge. Anthony was staring at the gun in his hands like he'd never seen it before. I didn't want any of this, he said quietly. I know, Michael replied. But it's not over yet. We need to get everyone out of here safely. Through the warehouse windows, Michael could see FBI tactical teams moving into position. The next few minutes would determine whether this ended with his family going home safely, or whether it became a tragedy that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The standoff lasted exactly 17 minutes. Michael knew because he was watching the digital clock on one of the battery-powered lanterns, counting each second as FBI negotiators tried to establish communication with Torino's remaining men. While his family sat tied up in the middle of what had become a war zone, Frank Torino was bleeding from his shoulder wound but still conscious, propped against a concrete pillar and glaring at everyone in the room with undisguised hatred. David Chen had dropped the gun after shooting Torino and was now sitting on the floor, staring at his hands like he couldn't believe what he'd done. Anthony Caruso Jr. had untied Michael's family and was now helping tend to Torino's wound, despite the fact that the man had been planning to kill them all just minutes earlier. Why are you helping him? Mark asked Anthony as he worked to stop the bleeding. Because my father taught me that you don't let people die if you can help it, Anthony replied. Even your enemies. Torino laughed bitterly. Your father was a hypocrite, kid. He talked about honor and family, but he was just another criminal who got lucky. Shut up, Frank, Anthony said quietly. Michael's radio crackled. Detective Henderson, this is Agent Torres. We have the building surrounded, but we need to know the status of all hostages before we can proceed. All hostages are secure, Michael replied. One suspect wounded needs medical attention. Situation is stable for now. Copy that. We're sending in a medic. Lisa was holding Emma and Jake close to her, trying to shield them from the worst of what was happening. Mike, she said quietly. What's this really about? Why did they take us? Before Michael could answer, David Chen spoke up from his position on the floor. It's about money. Hundreds of millions of dollars that Vincent Caruso stole from pension funds and union accounts over a period of 20 years. Mark looked at Chen with surprise. You knew about that? We all knew, Chen replied. That's what the internship program was really about. Vincent needed young, smart people to help him move money through complex financial instruments without leaving obvious trails. He thought college kids would be less likely to understand what they were really doing. Anthony stopped working on Torino's wound and stared at Chen. That's not true. My father ran legitimate businesses. Your father ran legitimate businesses as fronts for money laundering operations, Chen continued. The data flow software company was real, but it was also the perfect cover for moving illegal funds through dozens of shell companies and offshore accounts. Torino was getting weaker from blood loss, but he managed to speak. The kid's right, Anthony. Your father was one of the most successful money launderers on the East Coast. He just never told you about it. Michael could see the devastation on Anthony's face as the truth about his father's legacy became clear. But the FBI investigation, they said there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. There wasn't enough evidence because your father was very good at what he did, Mark said. And because some of the people he was laundering money for had connections in Washington. Chen nodded. That's why the other interns started dying. When the Justice Department announced they were reopening cold cases, someone decided it was safer to eliminate potential witnesses than to risk having the whole operation exposed. But why now? Lisa asked. Why after all these years? Michael's radio crackled again. Medic is on the way up. Eat at 2 minutes. Because, Torino said weakly. The statute of limitations on money laundering is 20 years. But if they can prove the money was connected to organized crime or terrorism, there's no statute of limitations. Anthony was staring at his hands, which were covered in Torino's blood. So my father really was a criminal. Your father was a lot of things, Mark said gently. But he was also trying to protect you from this life. That's why he sent you to the internship program instead of bringing you into the family business, directly. He wanted you to have a choice, Chen added. Something he never had. The sound of footsteps on the metal staircase announced the arrival of the FBI medic, followed by Agent Torres and 2 tactical officers. Torres surveyed the scene, quickly taking in the wounded Torino, the freed hostages, and the obvious signs of struggle. "Detective Henderson," Torres said, "are you injured?" "No, but Torino needs immediate medical attention." The medic immediately went to work on Torino's shoulder wound while Torres began securing the scene. "Where are the other suspects?" "There were 3 others with Torino," Michael replied. "I think they're still downstairs." Torres spoke into his radio. "Sweep the ground floor. 3 suspects still unaccounted for." As the medic worked on Torino, the man's eyes began to flutter closed. But before he lost consciousness, he looked directly at Anthony. "Your father left something for you," Torino whispered. "Safety, deposit box, First National Bank, downtown, box number 1247. Key is in his desk at the house." Anthony leaned closer. "What's in the box?" "Everything," Torino replied. "All the records, all the accounts, all the names." He wanted you to have a choice. With that, Torino's eyes closed and his head fell back against the pillar. The medic checked his pulse. "He's alive, but barely. We need to get him to a hospital immediately." As the tactical team secured Torino and prepared to move him downstairs, Agent Torres turned to Michael's family. "I need to get statements from all of you, but first, let's get you out of here and somewhere safe." Michael put his arm around Mark's shoulders. "Are you okay?" Mark nodded, though Michael could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "I'm okay. We're all okay. But Mike, this isn't over." "What do you mean?" Torino said there were people in Washington involved in covering up the original investigation. If that's true, then going public with what we know could be dangerous for all of us. Agent Torres overheard the conversation. "That's why we're going to put all of you in protective custody until we can sort this out." Anthony looked up from where he was sitting. "Agent Torres, I want to cooperate fully with your investigation. Whatever my father was involved in, I want to help make it right." Torres nodded. "That's good to hear, Mr. Caruso. But first we need to secure that safety deposit box before anyone else finds out about it." As they prepared to leave the warehouse, Michael realized that while his family was safe, the real investigation was just beginning. The truth about Vincent Caruso's money laundering operation was finally coming to light. But the people who had helped cover it up 20 years ago were still out there, and they would do anything to keep their secrets buried. The First National Bank of Kansas City opened its doors at 9 a.m. sharp on March 20th, exactly 12 hours after the warehouse confrontation. Michael stood in the lobby with Anthony Caruso Jr., Agent Torres, and a federal prosecutor named Sarah Williams, who had driven down from Washington overnight. Anthony held his father's desk key in his trembling hand. They had retrieved it from the Caruso family home at dawn, along with a search warrant that had uncovered 3 more keys hidden in various locations throughout the house. "Mr. Caruso," the bank manager said nervously, "I need to see identification and the death certificate before I can allow access to the box." Anthony produced both documents. Vincent Caruso had been dead for 7 months, but the safety deposit box had been paid up for 5 years in advance. "Box 1247 is in our high-security vault," the manager explained as he led them through a series of locked doors. "Your father was one of our most valued customers." The vault was a sterile, windowless room lined with hundreds of metal boxes. Box 1247 was larger than Michael had expected, about the size of a briefcase. Anthony inserted his father's key with shaking hands. The lock clicked open. Inside the box were 3 items: a thick manila envelope, a small leather journal, and a USB drive. Agent Torres immediately photographed everything before they removed it from the box. "We'll need to examine all of this as evidence, but you can review it first, Mr. Caruso." Anthony opened the manila envelope first. Inside were dozens of bank statements, wire transfer records, and handwritten notes in his father's distinctive script. The amounts were staggering, Transfers of 10, 20, even $50 million moving through accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Luxembourg. Jesus, Anthony whispered. How much money are we talking about? Agent Torres was studying the documents over Anthony's shoulder. Preliminary estimate, close to $800 million over a 20-year period. The leather journal contained what appeared to be a detailed record of every transaction, including the sources of the money and the ultimate destinations. Michael could see entries for union pension funds, construction company accounts, and what looked like payments from various organized crime families. But it was the USB drive that contained the most damaging information. Agent Torres plugged it into a secure laptop and began scrolling through the files. This is incredible. Your father kept digital copies of everything: bank records, email, communications, even recorded phone conversations. Anthony was reading through his father's journal, his face growing paler with each page. He knew he was dying. He spent the last year of his life documenting everything. Why? Michael asked. Why would he create evidence that could destroy his own organization? Anthony found the answer on the last page of the journal, written in his father's handwriting. For Anthony Jr., I have spent my life building something that I am not proud of. I told myself I was providing for my family, but the truth is that I became addicted to the power and the money. I cannot undo what I have done, but I can give you the choice I never had. Use this information to make things right, or destroy it, and walk away. Either way, know that I love you, and I am sorry for the burden I am leaving you with. Your father. Anthony closed the journal and sat down heavily in one of the bank's chairs. He wanted me to have a choice. Agent Torres was still scrolling through the USB files. Mr. Caruso, this information could help us recover hundreds of millions of dollars that was stolen from working families, pension funds that were looted, union accounts that were emptied. Your father's records could help us return that money to the people it was stolen from. But it would also destroy what's left of my family's reputation, Anthony replied. Prosecutor, Williams spoke for the first time since they'd entered the bank. Mr. Caruso, I want you to understand something. This information is going to come out eventually. The Justice Department's investigation is moving forward with or without your cooperation. The question is whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the cover-up. Anthony looked at Michael. Detective Henderson, what would you do? Michael thought about his family, tied up in that warehouse, terrorized because of secrets that had been buried for 20 years. I'd do the right thing, even if it was hard. Anthony nodded slowly. Agent Torres, I want to turn over everything, all of it. I want to cooperate fully with your investigation. Torres smiled for the first time since Michael had met him. That's the right choice, Mr. Caruso. But as they prepared to leave the bank, Michael's phone rang. It was Agent Martinez from the Kansas City field office. Detective Henderson, we have a problem. Frank Torino died in surgery an hour ago. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. What does that mean for the investigation? It means that the people who were pulling Torino's strings are going to be very nervous about what he might have told us before he died. And nervous people do desperate things. Agent Torres had overheard the conversation. We need to get Mr. Caruso into protective custody immediately. What about my mother and sister? Anthony asked. Torino said his people were holding them. Martinez's voice came through the phone speaker. We found them this morning. They're safe, but they're also in protective custody. The people who took them are still at large. As they left the bank with Vincent Caruso's evidence, Michael realized that they had won a battle but not the war. The truth was finally coming out, but the people who had helped cover it up for 20 years were still out there. And they would not give up without a fight. 3 days after the warehouse confrontation, Michael found himself in a conference room in the J. Edgar Hoover building in Washington, D.C., surrounded by more federal agents than he had ever seen in one place. The evidence from Vincent Caruso's safety deposit box had triggered what Agent Torres described as the largest financial crimes investigation in FBI history. Mark, Lisa, and the kids had been moved to a safe house in Virginia. while David Chen was in protective custody at an undisclosed location. Anthony Caruso, Jr. was cooperating fully with investigators, but he was also under federal protection after receiving multiple death threats. "The scope of this operation is unprecedented," said Deputy Director Patricia Hawkins, a stern woman in her 50s who had flown in from FBI headquarters to personally oversee the investigation. Vincent Caruso's records document money laundering activities involving at least 12 organized crime families, 47 legitimate businesses, and, she paused for effect, 6 current or former federal officials. Michael felt his stomach drop. Federal officials? 3 former Justice Department prosecutors, 2 former FBI agents, and 1 current federal judge, Hawkins continued, all of whom appear to have received payments in exchange for ensuring that certain investigations were dropped or delayed. Agent Torres was studying a thick file of documents. The payments were disguised as consulting fees, speaking engagements, and charitable donations. Very sophisticated, very hard to trace. Until now, added Prosecutor Williams. Vincent Caruso kept meticulous records. We have bank transfers, email communications, even recorded phone conversations documenting the corruption. Michael was trying to process the implications. So the reason the original data flow investigation was dropped was because Vincent Caruso was paying people in the Justice Department to make it go away, Hawkins confirmed. And when the department announced they were reopening cold cases, those same people panicked, which is why they ordered the elimination of potential witnesses, Torres added. They couldn't risk having their corruption exposed. A new voice entered the conversation from the conference room speakerphone. "This is Assistant Attorney General Robert Chen. I'm calling from the Attorney General's office." Michael noticed that David Chen looked up sharply at the name. "Agent Hawkins," the voice continued, "I need to know the current status of all witnesses in this case." "All witnesses are in protective custody and cooperating with the investigation," Hawkins replied. "Good. I also need to know who else has access to Vincent Caruso's records." Something in the man's tone made Michael uncomfortable. He looked at Agent Torres, who was frowning at the speakerphone. "Sir," Torres said carefully, "the evidence is being handled according to standard FBI protocols. Only authorized personnel have access." "I need a complete list of everyone who has seen those records," the voice insisted. "This case has national security implications." David Chen suddenly stood up from his chair. "That's my uncle," he said, quietly. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. "Robert Chen is my uncle," David repeated. "He's the one who got me the internship at Dataflow Solutions 20 years ago." The conference room fell silent. Michael could see Agent Torres and Deputy Director Hawkins exchanging meaningful looks. "Mr. Chen," Hawkins said carefully, "are you saying that Assistant Attorney General Robert Chen was involved in placing you in Vincent Caruso's internship program?" "He said it would be a good opportunity for me to learn about business and finance," David replied. "He said Vincent Caruso was a family friend." The voice on the speakerphone had gone quiet. "Assistant Attorney General Chen?" Hawkins said. "Are you still there?" No response. Torres immediately began typing on his laptop. "I'm checking the phone logs. The call originated from a cell phone, not from the Attorney General's office." Hawkins was already on her radio. "I need a trace on that call immediately, and I want a security detail sent to the Attorney General's office right now." Michael's mind was racing. If Robert Chen was involved in the original cover-up and he just found out that we have his nephew in protective custody, he knows that. David can identify him as the person who placed him in the internship program, Torres finished, which makes David a direct threat to his freedom. Hawkins was coordinating multiple operations simultaneously. "I want all witnesses moved to new locations immediately, and I want Robert Chen brought in for questioning." "Ma'am," came a voice over the radio. "Assistant Attorney General Chen left his office 2 hours ago. His staff says he had a family emergency. Find him," Hawkins ordered, "and put out a BOLO alert. He's now a person of interest in a federal investigation." Michael's phone rang. It was Agent Martinez from Kansas City. "Detective Henderson, we have a problem. Someone just tried to break into the safe house where your family is staying." Michael felt his blood turn to ice. Are they okay? They're fine. Our security team stopped the intruders before they got inside. But Detective, one of the men we arrested was carrying federal credentials. What kind of credentials? Justice Department. He claims he was sent to relocate your family to a more secure location. Michael looked at Deputy Director Hawkins, who had overheard the conversation. This is bigger than we thought, she said grimly. We're not just dealing with organized crime anymore. We're dealing with corruption at the highest levels of the federal government. Agent Torres was still working on his laptop. I've got Robert Chen's location. His cell phone is pinging towers near Dulles Airport. He's running, Michael said. Not if we can help it, Hawkins replied. She grabbed her radio. I want all flights out of Dulles grounded immediately, and I want TSA to detain anyone matching Robert Chen's description. As federal agents mobilized to stop a corrupt assistant attorney general from fleeing the country, Michael realized that his family's ordeal was far from over. The truth about Vincent Caruso's money laundering operation was finally coming to light. But the people who had helped cover it up for 20 years were willing to kill to protect their secrets. And they had resources that even the FBI couldn't match. Robert Chen was arrested at Gate B7 in Dulles Airport, just 20 minutes before his flight to Hong Kong was scheduled to depart. He had been traveling under a false passport and carrying a briefcase containing $2 million in cash and detailed records of offshore bank accounts. Michael watched the arrest through a live video feed from the FBI's mobile command center. Chen didn't resist when federal agents surrounded him, but the look on his face was one of a man who knew his life was over. Assistant Attorney General Robert Chen, Agent Torres said into his radio, you are under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder. Within hours, Chen's arrest had triggered a cascade of confessions and plea bargains. The 3 former Justice Department prosecutors named in Vincent Caruso's records turned themselves in rather than face federal manhunts. The 2 former FBI agents were arrested at their homes in Virginia and Maryland. Federal Judge Margaret Thornton, the highest-ranking official implicated in the scandal, was found dead in her Georgetown home from an apparent suicide. She had left behind a detailed confession describing 20 years of accepting bribes in exchange for favorable rulings in cases involving organized crime. It's over, Deputy Director Hawkins told Michael as they watched the news coverage from the FBI's Washington field office. The corruption network that protected Vincent Caruso's operation for 2 decades has been completely dismantled, but Michael wasn't celebrating yet. What about the people who killed the other interns? What about the men who kidnapped my family? Frank Torino's organization is finished, Agent Torres replied. We've arrested 17 people in the last 48 hours, including the 3 men who were holding Anthony's mother and sister. They're all facing federal charges for kidnapping, conspiracy, and racketeering. Anthony Caruso Jr. had been released from protective custody that morning and was now working with federal prosecutors to help recover the hundreds of millions of dollars his father had laundered. The money would be returned to the pension funds and union accounts it had been stolen from, providing some measure of justice for the working families who had been victimized. What happens to Anthony now? Michael asked. He's going to testify before a federal grand jury, Prosecutor Williams explained. But he won't face charges. His cooperation has been invaluable, and there's no evidence he was involved in his father's criminal activities. David Chen had also been cleared of any wrongdoing. His uncle's arrest had actually strengthened his credibility as a witness, since it proved he had been an unwitting pawn in the corruption scheme, rather than a willing participant. David's planning to return to his teaching job in California, Torres said. He wants to put this whole experience behind him. Michael's phone rang.